So today we're going to keep building upon what we did yesterday in the Desmos investigation. And so you could title this Intro to Graphing Trig Functions. So as a reminder of what we did yesterday. So yesterday we took a look at the unit circle and these periodic functions. And we took a look at certain angles here. So I'm going to redraw that axis through here. We're going to pretend it's centered, and so we said we have the coordinate 1, 0, 0, 1, negative 1, 0, 0, negative 1. And then yesterday we also were looking at our 45-degree angles. So we could draw all those into our circle. And if we were to label those side lengths here, we'd have root 2 over 2, root 2 over 2, negative root 2 over 2, negative root 2 over 2, root 2 over 2, and negative root 2 over 2. If we labeled these angles, we'd say that's our pi over 4, 3 45s, 5 pi over 4, and 7 pi over 4. So then we started graphing these, and so let's take a look at the sine first. So we said our sine, if we started at 0 degrees, our sine is at 0, so we put a dot there. And then we said pi over 4, 90 degrees, pi over 2, 3 pi over 4, pi, I'm going to run out of room here, 5 pi over 4, 6 pi over 4, 3 pi over 2, 7 pi over 4, and 2 pi. And so if you remember what we talked about previously, sine is our y value. So I'm going to take all of these y values and graph them. So at 0 degrees, our sine is at 0. At pi over 4, it's root 2 over 2, and we could calculate out what that is here as a decimal. So root 2 divided by 2. So we have 0.707. So that means it's going to go up here, and then it goes up to 1. And then it comes back down, 3 pi over 4.707. At pi, it's 0, and then it starts going negative, negative 1. So we ended up with this sine curve, basic sine curve. And then we did the same thing for our cosine curve. So I'm going to do the cosine curve in red here. So cosine was our x value, so it started at 1. And then it was that same height, but at pi over 290 degrees, it's 0. So again, now I'm graphing the x values. Going around the circle. So 3 pi over 4, it's negative root 2 over 2. Pi, it's negative 1. 3 pi over 2, it's at 0. 7 pi over 4, positive root 2 over 2, and then positive 1. So we have our cosine curve. So we have our cosine and our sine. And again, if we kept going around, this wave would continue. So we said it was this periodic function. So now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about a couple things about this periodic function. We're going to talk about our midline, our amplitude, and our period. So the midline is the horizontal line that divides it in half. So it's our midline. So if we were to look at this one, our midline is right in the middle. So our midline would be right here, is that x-axis. Our amplitude is how high it goes from the midline. Or we could say it's half the vertical height. So, you know, this goes from -1 to +1. So that's a difference of 2. So our amplitude would be 1, or from the midline to the highest point. And our period is the length of a wave before it starts to repeat. And both of these here, length of our wave on this one would be 2 pi. So what we're going to do is take a look at some of these graphs, and these you won't be able to copy these down here. You could try, but it'd be pretty difficult. And we're going to identify our midline, our amplitude, and our period. So our midline, if we were to divide this right in half, and I might say, well, this is 1. So if I was to look here, and from the bottom, so 1, 2, 3, 4. So our midline would be right in the middle. So that would be the equation y equals -2. And so our amplitude, like that difference between the height, or how much higher and how much lower from the midline. So it goes up 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So our amplitude is 3. And again, you could look at it as it goes from -5 to 1. So if we were to subtract those, you know, 1 minus -5, that's 6. Oops, I did that backwards. You got to add those together, sorry. So if we add those, -1, or +1, sorry. 1 plus -5 divided by 2 also gives us the -2, our midline. And then our amplitude, how much higher or lower then it goes. So it goes 3 above and 3 below. And so our period is the length of a wave. So if I was to start highlighting this, it starts kind of at the midline. And where does it go through a full cycle here? So highlight, highlight, well now it goes down and back up. So a full wave, it has to go to high and low and back to the start. That is 4 pi over 3. So if we take a look at this next one, the same thing, our midline, what goes right through the center. So if I was to draw a line right here, we go 2 above and 2 below. So our midline is at y equals -1. Our amplitude, how much higher and lower than that midline, is 2. And then our period. So this one starts at the midline, high, low, all the way back to get there. So our period would be 8 pi. And the last one here, what is our amplitude, our midline, and our period? So if I was to draw a line right through the middle, so that would be at y equals -4. It goes 1 high and 1 below, so, oops, sorry, that's our midline, my bad. Our amplitude goes 1 above and 1 below, so our amplitude is 1. And then this one starts, I always start at the y-axis for some reason. It starts at 0, so where do I get back to that high point is right here. So that is at pi over 2. So yesterday, you guys started looking at the difference between what you looked at a general equation. So from an equation. You guys looked at y equals a, the sine of bx, and y equals a, the cosine of bx. And in all of these, you guys looked at in that investigation, and you guys said that a equals our amplitude, and B affected the period. But how did it affect the period? And that was pretty hard to tell. You know, it affected it, but our period equals 2 pi over B. So for example, if I ask you to graph something, y equals 3, the sine of 2x, our amplitude would be 3, and our period would be 2 pi over 2, which would just be pi. So now when you're graphing this, I think the easiest way, so kind of like our unit circle when we looked up here, where did it go? Can't find what we did now. I think the easiest is to use like the 4 critical points kind of that you looked at yesterday. Where are the max and the mins and the zeros? And if you look at that, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 critical points. And what I'm talking about here is that we have a 0, a max, a 0, a min, and then a 0 again. Or cosine, we have max, 0, min, 0, max. So there's 5. And I always think about it, those kind of represent like the axes there. So I think the easiest way to do this, don't know why I can't find where I put these problems here. Is to take this and to divide it into 4. And our period's the last one. So this is going to be pi. Sorry guys, I am having a lot of trouble right here. So I'm going to label this one as pi. And then our amplitude, it's not a vertical shift, our amplitude is going to be +3 and -3. Our midline is going to be 0. And sine, so I always remember sine is our y value. So sine always starts at 0, or sine starts at the center. So this one would go low, high, 0, low, mid. Excuse me, it would start at mid, and we would have our graph. So if we were to take a look at another one here, let's say we had y equals 5, the cosine of 3 pi x. Our amplitude is 5. Our period would be 2 pi divided by 3 pi. So that's 2/3. So when you graph this, 1, 2, 3, 4. Our period here is going to be 2/3. Our amplitude, I'm going to put 5 and -5 because our midline is 0, but it is a cosine. And so just like our cosine is our x value, it's at 1, cosine starts at our amplitude. So it's going to start the high, mid, low, mid, high. And we have 1 period of it. So what you're going to be doing is on Delta Math, you're going to be graphing some of these. So for example, if you take a look at this, how you need to do this is it says set the x-axis labels. So if I look at this, my amplitude is just 1. So I could even say 1, want to count by ones. And your scale, I think this is easiest to label with a period. So I'm going to put 2 pi divided by 8 and click on done. And you'll see it brings it out here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to graph this 2, 3, 4. So I'm going to graph a cycle. It's a sine. So sine starts at 0. And then it goes to our amplitude to 0 to low back to there. So we have 1 wave. So if we take a look at another one here, this one says 5. Well, I could still count by ones because that'll fit. I'm going to label this as 2 pi divided by 8. And I'm going to drag this over. 2, 3, 4. Start at 0. Go up to 5. 0. -5.